Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. What an extraordinary week in Washington. And we're going to talk it over with a guy who has not been there long, just since January of 2015. Took over for Ed Pastor when Ed Pastor retired in Arizona Congressional District 7, which is basically Glendale, downtown Phoenix, most of southern and western Phoenix.
And Tolleson and Guadalupe.
Tolleson and Guadalupe. Ruben Gallego, Congressman Gallego is our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, John.
This has been remarkable.
It's been a heck of a week.
Has anyone in D.C. that has been around tried to tell you that this is like what?
So what I've heard so far, the closest they have, this is like Nixon during Watergate. That's the closest analogy that
How about
we've
Clinton, when all that was going down?
Even then, there was still a sense of normalcy that was surrounding it. But, you know, at this point, from a lot of the old hands that have been around for a while, they're telling me that the closest you get is Nixon during Watergate.
Let's roll tape number 3. Well, the director, Comey.
Comey,
What did you make of this whole thing? What's your take on this whole thing?
I think there's a lot of things that need to be answered, first of all. You know, Director Comey did his job. Some of us were unhappy with him. Some of us were happy with him. The one thing that I think many of us understand, though, is the reasons for him being fired by Donald Trump no longer make sense. He somehow claims that the Assistant Attorney General is the one who gave the order. Now he went on TV just yesterday and claimed that he gave the order.
That's Rod Rosenstein.
Rosenstein, who's a career Department of Justice employee. We never would have ever done something like this. It's all over the place, and the question is the president involved in obstruction of justice? If the president is involving himself in obstruction of justice to stop the investigation of Russia's involvement in our elections, then that starts meeting the threshold for impeachment. Are we there yet? We don't know. This is why we need to have an independent special prosecutor, though, I think, to really figure out what is going on.
Would a prosecutor, are we there yet where we need a prosecutor? Shouldn't we have a committee first to determine if there's reason for a special prosecutor?
Normally, I would say that we should go with a committee first, but I think what you've seen so far is 2 committees, both the Senate committee and the House committee, the House Intel committee, that has absolutely just abdicated their authority over oversight.
Because it's run by Republicans, in your view.
And it's not necessarily that it's because it's run by Republicans, but the ones that have been engaged so far have been more interested in either slowing down the process, giving breathing room, and or obstructing for President Trump and his staff, or just outright not conducting the oversight they're supposed to. When you have the former chairman Nunes that runs over mysteriously in the middle of the night to get classified material from persons that he will not tell us who it is, to use as a justification for whatever is going on.
And went to the White House.
Then went to the White House. It just doesn't show that you're ready to.
You were pretty strong on Nunes needed to step down, and he did.
And he did. And the next chairman, we hope will do better. But what we have seen so far is not the case. Now, the reason we believe a special prosecutor, not appointed by the Democrats, not appointed by the Republicans, but somebody who's truly there as an independent eye, would serve better the public in terms of getting down to the truth.
Let's show tape number 4. This is Donald Trump's tweet after this Comey thing went down. He says Dems have been complaining for months and months about Director Comey. Now that he's been fired, they pretend to be aggrieved, phony hypocrites.
Well, first of all, I think we should just point out that this is not normal. The fact that a president does this...
Nothing right now
is normal. So I think I want to make sure the public understands this.
Isn't that what the public kind of signed up for here?
Well,
they didn't want normal anymore.
Well, they got it, but at the same time, I just want to point out how sad it is that he is diminishing the status of the presidency by doing this. Number 2, I think many of us were unhappy with Director Comey. What we're unhappy with is the process of what is potential obstruction of justice. It's not the person we care about. It's the fact that this is a true insult to the rule of law and to accountability. And the fact that the president fired Comey for these kinds, what we believe are reasons that are unjustified, is dangerous.
Do we have evidence yet? Do we have any evidence, hard evidence yet, that he did this to quash the investigation into Russian connections to the Trump organization in the election?
Well, all we know for sure right now is what he told Lester Holt yesterday during his interview, saying that he looked into it and decided that he just wanted to end this. And I'm paraphrasing, and I think everyone can take the meaning of what the president said by his words. But clearly, the president, from some reports, asked Director Comey for his loyalty. The FBI does not serve the presidency. The FBI serves the public in justice. The president seemed to be very perturbed that he is not. That Director Comey had not validated his wild theories that the president had wiretapped him, and that he had still continued on this investigation. All these things point in one direction, including the president's own words, mind you.
This raises an interesting question, because some people watching this have said, well, how come the president has the power to fire the FBI director? FBI director serves for 10 years. But it does raise questions about kind of division of responsibility here and keeping the branches separate.
Right.
Do you question the wisdom of having the president with that kind of power?
Well, in the past, we normally would understand Democrats and Republican presidents understood norms and the rule of law. And we always assumed that they would not be as brazen to actually fire the FBI director. President Clinton did it once, and even then
there were ethics issues.
There was ethics issues involved, and the person that he appointed to him, after him, was a very strong and dogged pursuer of President Clinton himself. The problem with this is that Donald Trump's not acting like a normal president, because he's not a normal president. He does not believe in the rule of law. He believes in Trump law, which is entirely different from what we understand.
For people watching this who are supporters of the president, they think you guys are simply out to get him, that it doesn't matter what the issues are. You are on a mission to bring him down.
We're on a mission to save democracy. The problem with Donald Trump, President Trump, I should say, is that he makes himself a very easy target. And the reason he makes himself an easy target is because he's doing things that are outside the norms. And maybe the supporters of Donald Trump never liked the norms, but it's what has kept our democracy together. Presidents don't go on Twitter and attack other members of the co-equal branches of government. They don't attack the press. They don't fire FBI directors. They don't, have a campaign that colludes with a foreign government, whether he did it knowingly or unknowingly, and then proceed to do as much of carve as possible. These are not normal things.
You believe there was collusion between Russia and the Trump folks?
The Trump folks, I don't know if it goes to President Trump, but I do believe that there was some level of collusion among the Trump campaign.
Give me a sketch of what that would have looked like, because all the intel that I've looked at seemed to indicate that Russia early on thought Trump might have a chance to win. As the campaign unfolded, they, like most of us, thought he doesn't have a chance, we're writing him off, and we are going to damage Hillary Clinton because she's going to be the president. That it was really aimed at damaging her credibility on the world stage.
Well, the result is the same, and it helped
It's a little different, though. Are they actively trying to get Trump elected, or were they working to damage her? There is a difference.
I don't think there's a difference, because at the end of the day, it's a foreign entity and foreign intelligence service that's involving itself in our elections.
Right, and they do this all over the world.
And they just did it in France.
They did.
And they're going to do it in 2018 for the upcoming elections again. Now, the way this looks is, we know from many of the people around Donald Trump have years and years of relationships with the Russian government, either Russian oligarchs or the actual Russian government directly. For example, Paul Manafort was a lobbyist for Ukraine for the presidency that was aligned with Putin. You have Carter Page
was doing work.
You have Carter Page, who was paid by the Russian government, and you have Flynn, who was paid by Russian Times. And they were all active advisors on the Trump campaign. I believe there was.
Do you worry about Tillerson, the Secretary of State?
I don't have enough background on that. I worry about Tillerson largely because I think he does not have the history and/or the understanding of the Secretary of State. I don't know if I could say that he's part of this problem of collusion with the Russians.
Let me run a quick soundbite. This is Kellyanne Conway after the Comey firing. We won't spend too much more time on this, but she reacted to the Comey firing, speaking on behalf of the president out in front of the White House. Take a look.
I think as Senator Schumer prepares for his press conference, we should be asking him a few questions. Can you please reconcile all of your very recent statements about Jim Comey, calling into question his credibility, saying that you lost faith in lost confidence in his ability to do his job?
Is it possible, Congressman, that we have two things going on that are true? One, that the Democrats didn't like Comey. They weren't happy with Comey. That the president wasn't happy with him, and that may be the case. And that, you know, this might just be that he wanted to get rid of Comey. Is it possible, in your mind, that it didn't have anything to do with Russia, even though it looks terrible?
Yeah, I think there's, you know, a couple of truths there. One, Democrats are definitely not happy with Comey. And it's not that we're defending Comey himself. What we're defending is the institution of the independent FBI and their ability to hold the executive accountable. From what we've seen so far, and the problem with, you know, the miscommunication that's occurring right now, and what we are all interpreting was the motivation of the White House for firing Comey, is because the White House itself can't even get their story straight. We don't know who actually ordered the firing, instigated. We've heard
now Trump is more and more saying that he had thought about this and it was his idea.
If it's his idea, then we have to start calling into question what was the motivation for that. And then when you start going down that road, especially when it involves Russia, then you're starting to get into areas of obstruction of justice. The fault lies here with the executive. The executive has not been very clear. There's a process to do this that would have helped, you know, I think, clarify the motivation. They did not do that in a very typical Trumpian way. They just, you know, shot first and aimed later, and now they're blaming everyone else because they missed the mark. Let's
just, before we move on, because I want to get on to health care, what has he done so far? Forget the theatric stuff. Legislatively or actively, what has he done that seems completely out of bounds? Because to me, a lot of this, aside from his own tweeting and his own statements and the way he handles some of these things, the actual job of president doesn't seem very unusual to me. It's actually far more watered down than I thought it was going to be. There hasn't been anything spectacularly crazy. The Syria strike, it's more the theatrical stuff that I think gets your goat maybe than the actual...
Well, I mean, it's not the theatrical stuff. Again, it's the violation of the rule of law and the norms that we've established that has kept this institution together. You know, trying to pass a Muslim ban as soon as he got in without any forethought, without working with authorities, that caused mass chaos and interrupted our relationships around the world. That's not normal. Accusing the former president of the United States of wiretapping him during his campaign, that's not normal. Him tweeting at all, and even, you know, tweeting at different world leaders, attacking the press, that's not normal. These kinds of things matter. As time goes on and these types of actions are accepted as the norm, the next president, whether it's a Democrat, Republican, Independent, starts doing that, slowly erodes our idea of rule of law and democracy.
I guess I'm looking at more trying to draw a line between the bluster and what's actually happening on the ground. The Muslim ban is a good example for you.
Absolutely.
But the strike on Syria,
the strike on Syria, it's questionable, I think, but, you know, on which side you believe whether it was effective or not, or how useful it is. I think, you know, that in itself does not make a presidency good, great, or even stable. This presidency is not stable. It is destabilizing the country. In itself, this presidency, the reason because they're not legislatively successful is because they can't even focus. Because the president himself is so erratic that his own deputies can't execute on a legislative agenda.
So you believe it's chaos?
It's absolute chaos over there.
Let me go to the health care bill. This is tape number 6. We're going to go a little long in this segment. The health care bill, the vote, the celebration at the White House. Take a look.
House Republicans boarded buses at the Capitol for the short ride down Pennsylvania Avenue to join the president for a victory lap on health care, all before heading out on a long recess.
It's dead. It's essentially dead.
President Donald Trump celebrating the first step towards fulfilling his campaign promise of repealing and replacing Obamacare.
This has brought the Republican Party together. We're going to get this finished.
The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
House Republicans pushing through a revamped version of the American Health Care Act, addressing concerns of conservatives who wouldn't support the original bill back in March, saying it did nothing to eliminate Obamacare-like mandates and taxes, while some moderates wanted more protections for those with pre-existing conditions. GOP leadership has been working behind the scenes to calm the fears of House members and have succeeded today.
This bill delivers on the promises that we have made to the American people. You know, a lot of us have been waiting 7 years to cast this vote.
Democrats lined up on the House floor today to slam the reworked legislation, claiming deep cuts to Medicare would hurt millions and saying up to 24 million more could lose their insurance.
Speaker Ryan once called this bill an act of mercy. An act of mercy. There is no mercy here.
The bill now heads to the Senate, where Republicans only hold a small advantage. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer already promising a fight, saying the bill is going nowhere fast. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
Gallego was our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. You guys chanted after that, na 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 na. What was the point? What were you trying to do?
Well, the point is actually to remind them there's going to be consequences to their action. And mostly,
so goodbye was you just lost your majority?
Absolutely. And more importantly, because we know this bill is going to have to come back, and we're hoping that they understand that there is going to be a lot of them that are going to lose their elections. And the fact that they did this to satisfy the ego of President Trump is the hardest reason. There was no need to rush this. The only reason that they actually rushed to do this was two reasons. One, the President Trump got into his mind that he was being considered a failure because he couldn't pass a health care bill. So they just did a small tweak on it and then pushed this through as fast as possible before the long recess. And the reason they did that is because they didn't want to have members of Congress going back to their districts and then being inundated with calls against this and having to go to town halls. Secondly, they wanted this as fast as possible before the CBO score comes out.
And you guys were chanting, show us the score. What's the score?
What's the score?
Meaning, what is the CBO, Congressional Budget Office,
right,
that scores how much this costs us?
And what are the effects are, too. Because we know on the last bill it's going to cost 24 million people their health insurance, just alone. Now, what is this tweak going to do? We don't know. How much is it going to cost us? We don't know. And the fact that they were rushing it so fast is because they're ashamed of it. They're ashamed of it. And it's a shame that people like Martha McSally was the deciding vote to make that happen. And she did not wait for that CBO score to make that happen.
What do you think happens in the Senate, and what do you think happens with reconciliation?
Well, I hope the Senate kills it, but if not, I think they're going to end up making this closer and closer back to the original Affordable Health Care Act, because...
With a different name.
Potentially with a different name. And it doesn't matter because President Trump will just claim the victory no matter what. Yeah. Because he doesn't actually care about policy or legislations or outcomes. He just looks at legislation as winning and losing.
Ruben Gallego, Congressman from Arizona's 7th Congressional District. Back in a moment with Congressman Gallego. We're going to talk about some of these town halls and what's been happening at those meetings as well when we return on Newsmaker Sunday. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with Arizona Congressman Ruben Gallego, Democrat from Arizona's 7th Congressional District. He was elected to Congress in 2014, graduated from Harvard, and after graduating from Harvard, joined the Marines, completing infantry training, and was deployed to Iraq. You saw a lot of casualties in Iraq.
Well, yes, actually, this last week was the anniversary of a lot of my friends dying. So
your best friend, you lost your best friend?
I lost my best friend yesterday, actually, well, May 11th. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for your service, by the way, Congressman.
My pleasure.
Let's show tape number 1. Okay. You went down to Martha McSally's town hall. She's a Republican in southern Arizona. Mm-hmm. She did not show up. You did. Yep. Tell me about this.
Well, you know, when you pass legislation, you need to be able to back it up. And I think the saddest thing that happened is that Martha went into Republican caucus and said, let's get this bleeping thing done, as excited as she was to pass it, and then she won't actually face her constituents and say what she voted for. So I decided to do it for her. We called for a town hall. We were able to organize in 2 days. About 800 people showed up, and we actually went through the elements of what just passed. You know, it's unfortunate that we have to do that, but we're entering a new time in politics where congressmen and members of Congress feel that they could just pass bills without waiting for a CBO score, without actually explaining what's going on. And then you have members of Congress, in terms of leadership at least, not Martha, but leadership like Paul Ryan, that are openly lying about the effects of this bill. And I think that's a very difficult situation that we're putting for the public in, and we need to break the barriers and actually communicate directly to the people.
Is this the flip side of what happened to Ann Kirkpatrick back in 2010 when the Affordable Care Act passed? There was outrage on the right that this thing had been jammed down the public's throat, they felt, without any Republican support, not a lot of debate. Is this the flip side of what happened? Sort of.
I mean, the process was longer with the Affordable Health Care Act. It took a year. I went through many iterations, went through many committees. It was a, it went through the normal process. You know, our complaint isn't necessarily that there was no Democratic support. There never was going to be Democratic support for a bill like this, because the goal of this bill was not to create a new healthcare system or to insure more people or to give better coverage. Their first goal was to get a tax cut for the top 1%. So that's been accomplished by this bill. And after that, they created a healthcare insurance bill around that to justify their tax cut. So that's never what's going to happen. The process of how they did it, though, is questionable. The process of how they excluded public input, you know, is sad, and this is why there's a lot of movement among constituents to hold their members of Congress accountable.
At the end of the day, what are we left with what you believe we'll get with the health care bill when there's reconciliation between the House and the Senate?
It's hard to tell right now, but I can tell you what we'll get right now. If this bill passes as it is, you'll have millions and millions of more people without health insurance that currently have health insurance. You'll have health care plans that are going to have higher premiums, but have lower, but cover less. You're going to have people with pre-existing conditions. Again, they're going to be kicked off their health insurance, or when they switch to a new job or new health insurance, will not have coverage. Do
you agree that the current law, though, is flawed? I mean, we saw Aetna this week pull out. The bottom is kind of falling out of the insurance market.
The bottom is falling out because it's being sabotaged by the Republican Party and by some frailties even within the Affordable Health Care Act itself. Now, I do believe we can fix it. I do believe we can do it in a bipartisan manner.
Can that happen in this climate?
Well, you know, I think it can happen in this climate if, you know, should this bill fail, the one that's being pushed by the Republicans, it could happen because it's going to get to a point where something needs to get done. There are, you know, movements that are also very positive. There are smaller insurance companies that are opening up in a lot of these states and counties that are starting to be helpful. We have Medicaid expansion that has been very successful in helping bring more health and wellness to a lot of people that tend to be cost the most when it comes to our insurance, comes to our healthcare industry. But there are ways to improve on the Affordable Health Care Act, and we should try to work together in a bipartisan manner to do that.
When we come back, we're going to talk to Congressman Gallego about some of the protests around the country, even the protests of this president, and see how much he believes this is organic and how much of this is just the loyal opposition saying, we don't want this guy because he's an R, he's a Republican. Back in a minute on Newsmaker Sunday. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with Congressman Ruben Gallego. I want to show you some video from Berkeley. You've had a couple of speakers out there, Ann Coulter, she got shut down, Milo Yiannopoulos. Take a look at some of this video, tape number 9. What's happening around the country? Is this stuff organic? Is it staged? What is going on? I mean, when people see these images, I think it makes a lot of folks uncomfortable.
Yeah, look at Milo right there. Clearly that's staged. He's staged to be provocative, and he says things to be provocative. And look, it's not a coincidence that the most conservative archetype and provocative speakers are choosing Berkeley, and then at that same moment there is a mixture of some of the two hardest agitators, the anti-fascists, and then you have these white supremacists. And just watching what they're talking about, they are essentially using Berkeley as a way to highlight a stage. Look, I went to hear Ann Coulter speak in college. You know, free speech is very essential, even speech that is
abhorrent. To what you defend the right of someone to speak what you don't agree with, right?
That's the nature of this. Now, I think we have to be aware when there are people that are doing this as a shock, as a shock to the system, or using it to basically create an environment where there is going to be this type of, conflict. And I think that's what's happening in Berkeley. Why is it happening in Berkeley and not in some other state university? It's because they like using the term Berkeley as a
flashpoint.
It's a flashpoint.
I grew up there. I know the area well. Okay, 30 seconds left. Is there any middle ground left in America?
Oh, the middle ground is actually with the American people. And it's not the politicians. We are a reflection of the hope. We are a reflection of how they vote. But the American people are the moderating force in this country. And
10 seconds. If you saw Mr. Trump right now, what would you say to him?
Respect the rule of law and the institution of democracy.
Good to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you.
Great to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you, John.
Thank you again for your service to this country.
My pleasure.
We do appreciate it, and we owe you a deep debt of gratitude.
My pleasure.
Back on Newsmaker Sunday next week with Dave Muncy, as Dave Muncy calls it quits, retiring after 42 years at this station. We're going to talk to Dave about some of his remembrances. Thank you, Congressman.